Thank you.
So, since we started late, we're going to have the session up to 4 o'clock, from 2 to 4.
So, if you have some sort of other sort of work, then you can leave. Oh, yeah. That's 33. 이번에 로빈디 제선다 다 제나 또는 로빈 파발인데 디는 저거 시접을 로빈지 선지 개발 대신스 시접을 최저야 말에 가다我早些肉给写工人吃的，知道吧？我们早些肉做些肉给，但这可能也当然把它早些送的呀嘞，对，实际上呢，你看了，没得我们的送去，但呢，长久生活着的一切，但呢，留起嘛的这个呢。这可能也当然不，这呢，中等民众有地的嘛，地对吧？地的个呢，对吧？可是我大是这样，找领导呢，大是这样。
So we will read from section 4 now, which starts, the English translation starts on page 33, where the text begins by saying that the chief follower, the principal follower of Master was Aryadeva, who explained the system of Master Nagarjuna extensively in his 400 stanzas on the middle way. So if you look at the 400 stanzas on the middle way, it is obvious that Aryadeva wrote that text as a supplement to Nagarjuna's fundamental stanzas on the middle way. In fact, Aryadeva's text does not even have a salutation verse. There is no verse of homage. And since Nagarjuna's own text really almost exclusively presents the teaching on emptiness, Aryadeva's text supplements Nagarjuna's text by initially presenting the practices related to meditation on impermanence, cultivation of bodhicitta, compassion, and so on. And then the second part of the text then presents the view of emptiness, but in a different way, where unlike the Nagarjuna's text, in 400 stanzas, Aryadeva really critically examines all the important tenets of the important tenets that presents their view of ultimate nature of reality, and then within that framework, then establishes the Nagarjuna's teaching on emptiness.
Any kirum god and reggae shumda dostidi orla. Any I am there, the Rime Tanji Judu Shum Kashim Shujida Zaje into one.
So similarly in the Vajrayana presentations as well, one of the Nagarjuna's principal texts is the 5 stages of completion. And Aryadeva has an important meaning commentary on that text, which is entitled "Lamp on the Practices."
Yeah. That's the Sanjay John the Lendeji. Dawat Chapot, Dawat Champas division. Dawat Chapota. She was all also. Umo Chamunam Yakan, Lovin and Joe, each of you, Cheto. 대실 별로 이게 슝라 슝첨 시머러번 서와들 임베 늘 파고 예수지 제수 대다고 공부者주셔서 잘라 대양 너번 보고도 류 청주로 쏘고 개별 공부 뭐부 유명한 이자게 저 우메된 주로 미나베 델레 샴바 슝 여반은 게 룩캡을 쳐는 셔버 자고스다 다도 레스토랑에 수고가 아이송다 지금
So,
로벨랭데 딱 로벨 상제장 부터 버리자. 개우야 말이. 리디 딱 간다. 지 개인 디버성 민장 다유 샤다디 짠류체 손으로 와. 댄지데버 중에 아니 대권은 이때 시우 지다 뒤쳐보지. 그러나 부터버리잖아. 그 직직 맨날 뮤직 전에 지디 아니 뭐니 주나 뒤니샤고 쳐버렸어. 때내다고 지셨어. 어때봐. 뭐니 주나 최저한테 늘선 로션 드리스. 때내다고 하면 누가 왔어. 다들 쉬우는 것보다 지디. 전에 오다 사제장게 부터버리다 쉬우지 개정을 때내로는 렌데지 어느 그런 게 랑좀 나셔디 원님부 대인자와 또해봐 쉬우지 가서 그게 다시보다 림부슈스도가 배지 또가 나리 뭐 또가 나라 코자스 이게 넘버 10로 강사게 타녀 무슨 도대스 저 강사게 천시 다가다 타녀도 랑제 제시와 인도자네 강사게 천시 풍부스네 샤고요 그래 어다 천시 이게 남시대 강사게 천시 샤버래 엔디 샴래 야라라 에네 섬섬 고베 그돌이야 에네 군다 데 다셔를 지다 도시를 지디 다셔나네 도시 형식이 뭐로서나 에네 고도도 찾아도 손데 가다 타녀도 랑제 샤지시기 버디 사고요 그래 다디 샴마 주전 투는 거야 돼다 마찬가지로 되고 어떻게 지리 다시 로벨랭의兄弟的 修지 되도록 가서 그게 동심보다 아니 택시 거주 어디서 저기 배출 로벨랭의兄弟 같이 쉬리 저 내가도 딱 거야셔 아니 뭐지
Then the Tsongkhapa goes on to explain how many of the principal followers of Nagarjuna, such as Buddha Palita, Chandrakirti, Bhavaviveka, and so on, really consider Aryadeva to be equally authoritative. So both Aryadeva and his teacher Nagarjuna were therefore referred to by some early Tibetan commentators as model Madhyamakas, like the original Madhyamakas, because both of their writings are taken as authoritative by subsequent commentators. So among the various subsequent commentators, there are important figures like Buddha Palita, whose commentary on Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom is not very extensive. It's kind of short, but at the same time, it's a very powerful text. For example, it really kind of emphasizes the understanding of this phrase, this mere conditionedness, how understanding of the world and nature has to be understood in terms of mere conditionedness and no kind of, reification beyond that level of mere conditionedness. And also there is an important phrase when Buddha Palita uses in his text, which I remember, where he says that if things possess a self-defining nature, a kind of an intrinsic nature in their own right, then what need is there for us to postulate their existence? And because there is no need for their dependence. And similarly, in Bhavaviveka's writing, there are extensive writings by Bhavaviveka, his own original work, Essence of the Middle Way, and its auto-commentary, The Blaze of Reasoning, which is an extensive text where Bhavaviveka develops his own unique interpretation of Nagarjuna. For example, when he talks about what is the basis of personal identity, he identifies the mental consciousness and its continuum to be the basis of the thought I am. So therefore in Bhavaviveka's writings, which is quite extensive, we also find extensive presentation of the proof of the authenticity of Mahayana scriptures and the Mahayana teachings. So getting some familiarity with Bhavaviveka's writings is also important.
Oh yeah. That didn't 다시 그렇게 말로 먹었네. 다들 우머를 집에 파고 싶었죠. 우머 텐주에 파고 싶었죠. 나 우머를 집에 다 안 돼. 다들 영화는 좋다. 편지들의 리카셔 나라 아니 자시로 아니 거사대 로베랑게 랑지 요리스네 칼레지 거제 지인데 로베랑게 자베리스 소메 요리 레디네 점지되면 심중는 전에 대티래 라진이 좀 잡아 칼레지 거에서 주보 파고 하양스 에노 파고래 쉽게 병탄 저선들이 또 common sense 상담이나 기계 캐바셔부 슈디기 애니 슝 나라리아 애니 기루루가 자야세리 야도스 데보스케 베터시 이 시대 가래지미 먼저와 또 스티브스는 데가스 근데 치부시다요 말이 사실이 가래지미 루주고 상제 말이 송요래.
And then one of the texts which traditionally is also recognized as auto-commentary of Nagarjuna's fundamental stanzas on the middle way, Kalajigme, Tsongkhapa examines this and says that, for example, in the 27th chapter, there is a quotation from Aryadeva's text. So why would Nagarjuna, who was the teacher, feel the need to quote from his own student? So Tsongkhapa, based on this and other considerations, to really demonstrate that this particular commentary is not by Nagarjuna himself. So it's not an auto-commentary. And furthermore, if it was genuinely Nagarjuna's own auto-commentary in the subsequent authoritative works by someone like Buddhapalita, Chandrakirti, and so on, one would find citations from that commentary, but that is lacking as well.
ngobolo ko wonde ba indis kunda saade takwe chada doshi chachen doshi sibe na de ne pageta shangware ene ka rangchen turis di rangchen mo tu slabe na ene kundi tu sung sha de 타냐도 ene doshi tokati ene rangchen tu shi gi wadi ko sabudo ga na jisongre
So, and then the text proceeds by presenting the unique perspectives of Nagarjuna's main followers, Bhavaviveka's interpretation and Buddhapalita's and Chandrakirti's interpretation. So in Bhavaviveka's interpretation, one of the important points Tsongkhapa brings up is that Bhavaviveka, when examining the mind-only school's statement that the imputed nature is a mere construct and it is devoid of intrinsic characteristics, and Bhavaviveka asked the question, when you say that imputed nature is devoid of characteristics, intrinsic characteristics, are you talking about the actual constructed nature, or imputation itself, or are you talking about the imputing mind, the concepts and the thoughts? If it is the latter, the imputing mind is part of the mental world of inner experience. So by rejecting intrinsic reality to this, you would be denigrating the empirical world of experience. So this, by implication, shows that in Bhavaviveka's own system, they accept intrinsic reality, at least on the conventional level, to the conditioned world.
패션 도도 건조이 됩니다. 예등 도레스. 에노티 이니 모님 해봐사디 선임원이 먹어서 소소해야 돼. 단답하고 단답하고도 재밌어야지. 근데 사실 뭐예요? 아니 대신도 같이 쉬워서다. 까말라실라. 되게 너도 건데 돈이 처음 때문에다 흉을 표시 집는 게 아래. 내 정도 집는 게 아래.
So
나중에 tenju고 있다다.
So Bhavaviveka and also later Shantarakshita and his student Kamalashila, all of these great masters in the Madhyamaka Svatrantika school of thought, they are united in recognizing that the Samdhinirmochana Sutra, the primary sutra of the mind-only school, sutra unraveling the intent of the Buddha, is acknowledged as being a definitive scripture. So this is something that Bhavaviveka and Shantarakshita and Kamalashila all share in common.
Oh yeah.
So we will now read from the Prasangika section, which is on page 36. Yeah. So this is section 4. Yeah. 5. Sorry. Is it section 4, chapter 5?
다들 고대한테 뒤슈들이 대표지. 그래서 그지시도다. 까말라시를 배지 쇼딩부터 다들은 다 전주원한테 손주자네. 다들 다 사제치야 되게 쇼 뭐지 다들 로변 사제 장지 로변 사제 장지 자와시르긴 대반자말라 렌덴이 꽤 먹고 소야 다음에 일을 밑에 관에 꽤 마셔라스 제네스 주수 기장 타녀도 지난 그때인데 규모적으로 자와 전유수 여신 전다 봐 오니면 쉐반니 파와 연설을 렌데시도 선제장으로 쏘고 오면은 마왔는데 실제 파도 집에 주 담보시 차지스 타녀도 규모적으로 여봐도 전다 봐 오니면 로변이 나올 셔도 대신도 이 신인보다 쉬워서도 까먹을 싫어서 쏘고는 얘기장 선제장으로 나와서 롤러 룩탕 랑그 룩니라 담이지 쳐봐 입에 좀 마셔도 나와서 왜니 사제신이 법을 공부 지도하시도 때 제대로 랑그 된다고도 군주를 주로 쳐버리면 셔라 랑그 룩니 우모버 셔기 저거도 투모모인 뭐 셔지스 다 룩니는 투모모인 거 오셨네 더 손을 다들 지도 우메 땡주 마도 뭐 땡주 현에 동번이 지셔비 취인디 치지 말라고 미지버 현도스 우모 자시로 그 나네 소는 신지기 다 동네 참면 남샤 흉샤다네 배다 뚱뚱해봐 다들이 나와서 소인도사네 토미 구지로 서고 드지 흉리야 야마리스 다음에 이게 남샤도 송고요 이네 루루 다 우메 땡주 자시로 송고래 자시로 때문에 신지기 수치를 송야 말이스 대신도 고자게 룩들 컨시 개래다 잡아 녀베 룩 니네 중앙 대한 동번이 취했다 땡주 샤는 매도 시 개발은 개발 자도 쓰스 대실 나리 아니 나타왜 다 로메션다즈 루주도 렌데다 어디서 가서 담이 시즈 아니 다녀도 이거 된다면 뭐니면 봤어야 돼서 직송 이버지 또 스타고 뭐시 할때 나도 사가라 되는 아제 아니 랑게다 자시로 그 고마워야 돼 우모가 현대 투문이 뭐지 이 정도야
So then the section on the Madhyamaka Prasangika begins by pointing out that Buddha Palita wrote a commentary on Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, which was then critiqued by Bhavaviveka. And although Bhavaviveka and many of his other subsequent kind of commentators do not seem to think that there is a difference between themselves and Buddha Palita insofar as the view of no self is concerned. However, it was Chandrakirti who later in his exposition of Nagarjuna's middle way brought out the uniqueness of Buddha Palita's interpretation. And he writes here, he says, so this is citation from Chandrakirti's own auto-commentary on entering the middle way, which is the last para of page 36, where the citation reads, "Let the experts please be certain that what we expound here in the course of our rebuttal of any other system accords with the doctrine of emptiness, and that such is not the case with other treatises. Just as they are certain that this doctrine known as emptiness is not taught flawlessly in any treatises other than Nagarjuna's fundamental stanzas on the middle way." So what Chandrakirti is saying here is that insofar as the final teaching on emptiness is concerned, other than in Nagarjuna's writings, you cannot find this exposition in the great masters of the other traditions such as Asanga, Vasubandhu, and so on. And then he goes on to say that, and thus the proposition advanced by some that the middle way standpoint conventionally accept the very same things for which the traditionalist posit ultimacy should be recognized as merely an expression of utter ignorance of the actual meaning of the middle way treatise. So the point Chandrakirti is making is that the unique way of understanding, in Nagarjuna's own writing, there is the statement that all phenomena are devoid of true existence, which Bhava Viveka and others accept. But where Chandrakirti it makes it very explicit and clear is that this notion of ultimacy that is being negated has to be really understood in terms of intrinsic nature. That intrinsic nature is rejected, and this is the selfhood that is being negated.
Mm-hmm. Let me finish this medicine. Yeah. That's it. That's the Shamdayan. It's a Lola, that's a sort of Taras. This is a Davidson, and she never should have someone very with Chitty, looking at two more, she covered it never shall, she has some Rangalo Umovation, the two more but Tinsi, Tamani, Tan Tabar Mavanam, Umobukuzo, Deve, Ume Takonani, Mishiban Joke to Sini, Rangalola, Tanya to Ranga singing to the Che Mandela. Tezan indeed in the Jawasla in the Charos. The magic Noronchili Yamna, Chishule and Yabangue, the need to the Manyambe, Jizen and Devision, the Dini and Yabi, Division, the Dini County, somewhat Miriam Power Lodin, and Tandota was a Kuzo, the young woman. Two my nose. So Takada Tanya to Yada Ranzem Mishivri Jenny She Umova Lendetu, Tanya to Ranzishing and Sha. Satiri into Gasha Ada Ume Goya Gasha di Lonnemela Nana one Shawa Maimbo, Yura, two Maimbo, Duluju and Drua. Digital Taka Sukua. Jenny, Nana one gave a Mahimasan, Pugin Nayak, Adangazu Pugeta, Chinang Chokari in Puge, Chiki, nine to Zane, or turning work on the Druachi, work on the Druachi, Lord Nagadua. That day, now that the Druaris. So, that as a Lord Nemela now one Shabu Maimbo, Yuran, two women to look in the Druid Shona, that the Tati culture is Disukari. Saturday to Zane, Gaksha Taba, one shit, Mina Sungari. Tanya to Ransom Michigan, Manazolia Puggy, 20 minutes, you was in Nandia, Taga Kazanan Zuyaris. 그러나 숙도 있는 게 숙 된รู있는 게 아래 다 숙수 나왔는데 그 치지 말아버려 저거를 다 간다 숙수 따야서 숙집에 참아들고 저기도 와 얘네 뒤숙 제지가 참아들래 숙 된루고 나와도 샤요 게 아래 서든이 인도산에 숙 제지가 참아대 간다 능률 추디 아래 고래 신윤 진다 숙수 다땡이 되기 진다 되는 맞추어 차되기도 와. 그 진다가 유도 맞추어 차. 그런 능유도 주디야 그래서. 근데 인생은 가서도 뭐 와시를 나와 있죠. 다 되는 인들 말한 줄다 파괴냠샤 예시 마도베 아주 심정이 되게 시바 가리네. 에 대나도 잡아 인도 전에 추시바 마도 요 말이지 송도와. 이 상도서 쉬고 나 좀 쉬고 할 때. 왜 자주 모르셔? 어떻게 다 다대와디 태교와다 정규바 신의 송샤티当成这些蒙古国家所说的，对嘞，就是唐都什么那就送下来，人是也不毛啊，人是没法毛啊，真的，切下来。第三，这个南沙团大的，可能是第二个，我们不人是也不毛啊，我们不人是没法毛啊，那做产业就是。다 다녀도지라 간다. 제가 다녀도는 야. 제가 랭데는 소티디 러시아와 마야 오마버들이. 산제 장다 나와쳐와. 엔드는 쉬워라. 드주 제디 다녀도랑제 매번 마을 차대요. 그래서 직디 나도 전다도 고생해. 셔. 태교와도 정규버스 전에 신의 정규에 전다디. 양지 컨디션 쓰고래. 태교에서 컨디션 쓰랬으니 양지 가서 대신 먹고 싶어 저는 신문도 하고. 그 건데서도 태교와서 저기서나 저거에서 호텔을 싸우셔는데 한 대신 먹고 가서 그러셔.
So what is being presented here is the very important distinction between among the commentators on Nagarjuna, those like Bhavaviveka on the one hand, though accept some notion of intrinsic nature on the conventional level, and on the other, Chandrakirti and Buddhapalita and Prasangika's camp, that on the other hand rejects the notion of intrinsic nature even on the conventional level. So, for example, in the Bhavaviveka's system, when they talk about what is it that is being negated in the development of wisdom and emptiness, what is the emptiness empty of? You have to identify the object of negation, and in Bhavaviveka's system, that what is being negated is some kind of reality that the mind imposes upon the object, and a reality or a status that is not affirmed by a veridical experience. So therefore, for Bhavaviveka, much of our sensory experiences are valid. So when you see objects in front of you, flowers, forms, and so on, the sensory perceptions are valid. There is no delusion, delusion on the sensory level. It is at the level of thought. Those kind of delusions are brought in. However, for Chandrakirti, even our sensory perception is shot through and through by diluted perception. That's because, when our sensory perceptions perceive the world, we perceive some kind of already a separateness from the perception. We also perceive some kind of objectivity, externality to the things that we perceive. So there is already, even in the sensory experience, that kind of a perception of this delusion built into this. So therefore, in Chandrakirti, according to Chandrakirti, except for those instances when the yogi attains a direct realization of emptiness in meditative equipoise, all states of mind, so so long as we are sentient being, not enlightened, all states of mind on an unenlightened level are diluted, at least at the perceptual level. So when you have, for example, a perception of a flower or a form, although at the level of apprehension, it may be a valid cognition because there is a flower there, you perceive it, there is a correspondence, and there is a truth value to that perception. But at the perceptual level, because it projects this objectivity to the, to its object, there is already a delusion at the level of perception. So a distinction is drawn between kind of illusion at the level of perception, but being veridical or valid at the level of cognition or apprehension. So Jantrakriti makes these kind of distinctions. And so basically, the point is that all of our experiences, whether perceptual or cognitive, according to Jantrakriti, is really colored by this perception of intrinsic nature, some kind of intrinsic nature to reality. And see, it is on this basis two main strands of interpretation of Nagarjuna emerged. And this is what Tsongkhapa brings up in his Lamdam Chimo explanation of the two main strands of interpretation. He talks about those Madhyamaka who accepts the notion of intrinsic nature on the conventional level, and those Madhyamakas who reject the notion of intrinsic nature, even on the conventional level. And he divides in that way, which seems to be an easier way of understanding these two broad interpretations. Whereas when we use the classification or category of Sutrantika, Swatrantika versus Prasangika, which is the consequentialists and the syllogists, those who propound the syllogism versus those who prefer consequentialist reasoning, it seems to presuppose a lot of background understanding. And then you have to first of all explain what is a syllogism, what is a consequential reasoning, and why is one called consequentialist, another one called, syllogist. So it presupposes a lot of background knowledge. Whereas if we make the distinction between the two broad camps on the basis of whether or not the particular standpoint accepts intrinsic nature or swabhava on the conventional level or not, then that seems to be a much more clear way of distinguishing between these two broad streams of interpretation of Nagarjuna.
Tenju wada rangyu was lawyake, tenju sajada, rangyu, tensi sanyavude, tenju rule, tenju da rangyu sa, tenju da tensi yungurvada. Da anda de rangyu tensi sajade, tensi rangwa saji. Da tsusum jaji ki tsama rangsan nangwa la de, ene, mochwe shiva shadeyaji. Da di, goro di, di shaman tayunguri, goro nyoro tsawre. 자상하고 안들이 테라니 랑 사디에 가서다 랑유 댄시 생디야 댄시 메시지지 텐주 댄시 메두가 맺체 텐주 로기 가서 텐주 류리 댄시 류리 다 안들이 테라니 치즈네 댄시 샤데야데 랑유 댄시 사다데 랑유 댄시 사데 랑완도 랑유 사데 간다 고전직으로 셔네 라오의 댄시사지, 라오의 댄시사지, 수순 제직 참아 대이네, 랑자당을 때문에로 다 수순 랑원을 줘, 다 디식도.
So, of course, it is not the case that Prasangikas only use consequentialist reasoning and not syllogism, and the Swatrantikas only use syllogism and not consequential reasoning. That's not the. But the difference is that the Swatrantikas tend to use a particular kind of syllogism which Prasangikas reject. And what is that particular kind of syllogism? It is referred to as an autonomous syllogism, where in the structure of the logic, the structure of the argument or reasoning presupposes some premise whereby the two parties involved in that argument, both of them are presumed to possess a commonly shared perception of the three members of the logic, the subject, the predication, and the reason or the sign, that somehow all of these three members of the arguments are established by a commonly verified perception that somehow relates to the intrinsic nature of these three members. And that kind of very particular type of syllogism is being rejected by the Prasangika. And this will come later. It's quite a difficult debate and a subtle argument.
Oh, yeah. That is that. You were good at the Chinese don't also do. That is tell nothing you said. That he never chill. Good at the Chinese don't do you song to then still never temper tongues. Yandu you don't let young, that means you would turn Shabba. That one of the traditions of the Rangasing, tradition to sooner, Rangasing to so in Shana. Dilo Tomo to number looks over Chades. Kansan di led the Cheso, Jewu the Yong, she was Tanya Tawala, Rangapumbu Dini, Kansa Yinam. When the Tara turn Shan shit, Kansa Tanya Tawa Te turn Zadi. Turn Jigwe, turn Jiguan, turn Tadaba. Turn Jigberry, turn Jiguan Amraba, Shasaga. Turn Jiguan, turn Tadala, so where Chok Konoshi, Yene. Kansa de Josa Chona, La Sogobolo Sogol John Nula. Manina, John Mineve, Kansa Tanya, that was only Missimber. Te Tanya Kala Tabu, those shit, Chidi, Judge, Zen and Jona, Kasarang sing you to enjoy in this. Dr. Zen, in the Kansa say, what or Rangi, that Ming Kansa say, Ming di Juse Tenji. 유중면에 요구하지. 자, 드네 인도산에다 어디 하다 가서 드네 인도 어디 드네게 많이는 좀 민의베스 간사가 타냐 딱 와서 무슨 말 대타냐 간다고 뜻이지 시대에 제시 제는 전화 가서는 그 생기 주는 저거 인데스 저다다 당주 제닝 아니 생식이 남시 간사에서 하다 로벨인데 게티 숨으로다 다가는 신기다 제 남지 좀 나라리야 이 거를 남시 초 계속네 근신 남시야 돼 강사사 탄년 도세 시 특도르디 근신 남시들이스 대냐마샤가 것도 마샤가 것도 가지고 있네로 제가 상해가 너무 되지면 내가 내 근실로 못된 sem지 이해야 되지 그래서 그거와 사실은 인도산에 어떻게 많이 전에 지도자들은 저는 가사랑 생이 좀 저거 인데 라도 싫어도 마와네 오늘 저기 봐 탐제 대신도 너도 다들 가사듯이 다 가사 가는 때는 딱왜 제 풍수 다 수도 소화로서 이 대신도 수도 소화로서 늦게다 누마시 타는 더디베 턱을 나버 짜서 내가다 나가서 저거 연체적 룸데스 참여 주고 내가 탐제 여러 저거는 라는 미게 타년 주고 주시 된데 진짜 식도 주고 자와나 대니에 된 매나 여러 저 메뉴에 다 방면에 요구하지 objectively 그래 요구하지 여러 저 메뉴에 대는 도발라 여러 저거 또게 중네 전신 되고 코너라 랑사다 다 또게 참아 남지 것들이야 아니 단담 전신 되고 되네 가사다 단담 시선다 가다 뭐라서 단담 때문에 튀지 다버지세 그것도 때문에 튀지세냐 랑세 단담 소라지도가 자데 도게스네 전신되고 코너라 랑사다 뭐가 돌아서 현재 투모모이 뭐 참바 매 상화도 랑 생이도 셔봐다 랑 생이도 랑세니 최신도 메다오스 제 지제 랑세도 주요만 사가 랑세되다 안데 뒤끔데 랑세 고야게 랑세디 다 백하가레스 다가는 시그 뭐베숑데 랑지생이 소야게 디다 다 찬주 제 샤샤도 제디 아니 고버시서 베면다레스 제송고야레.
So in the next section, which is on page 38, the text then discusses, the kind of graspings that are present in us. Some of them are innate, natural, and some of them are intellectually acquired as a result of philosophical conditioning. And then the text goes on to try to identify what constitutes a grasping at inherent existence, what constitutes a grasping at intrinsic reality. And here we read, it says that what sort of mental habits hold things to be intrinsically real? And then the text says, to describe, first of all, the pattern of this mental habit of the philosophers, they investigate the meaning of the conventional expressions such as person and so on in such uses as this person performed this action and experienced this result. By analysis, such analysis as, is the person the very same thing as his own aggregate, or is he something different from them? So, and when they discover whichever possibility, either sameness or difference, to be the case, it gives them the basis for establishing that person, and then are then able to establish his accumulation of evolutionary action and so forth. So what Tsongkhapa is talking about here is that the philosophers, when they speculate on the nature of person, they inquire whether the person is the same, identical to the physical and mental constituents that make up the person, or is person something distinct and separate from the physical and psychological constituents that make up the person. And in this way, and the basic thrust is that when you search for the true essence of what that person is, there should be something findable. So as explained before, Bhava Viveka identified the stream of consciousness to be the real person. And in the mind-only school, some branch identifies an eighth category of consciousness called alaya, or soul consciousness, which is understood to be constant and present all the time, neutral and stable in its continuity, to be the real person. So Tsongkhapa is pointing out that all of these schools they subject a concept like person to an ultimate analysis, and they are seeking for the essence of that phenomena, and they posit the reality of that through this kind of inquiry. And then the text goes on to say that hence they cannot rest content with the mere use of the expression person. Thus, such establishment of person through analysis, analytic investigation into the referent of the conventional expression person, is the establishment of person as having intrinsically identifiable basis. And then he concludes by saying that all Buddhist thinkers, realists to the Svatrantika, hold their various types of persons in this way. So in this way, Tsongkhapa explains what constitutes grasping at the inherent existence of a person. So when you posit the identity of a person on the basis of some kind of search for its essence, and then latch on to something as being the real person, that is a grasping at inherent existence of the person. Then the same analysis is extended to the phenomena, the aggregates, which is the basis for the notion of person. And he writes that similarly, this pattern of establishment of intrinsic existence holds with regard to all things, either created such as forms, sensations, and so on, or unconditioned, inclusive of the Sautrantika concept of space. And then at the conclusion of that paragraph, Tsongkhapa makes an important point about the need to be aware of the different uses in the uses of the term svabhava, or intrinsic nature, in different contexts. He says svalakshana, or unique characteristics, or self-nature is used differently. So, for example, in the epistemological texts, so in the epistemological texts, there is a discussion of svalakshana, or the self-nature, as referring to conditioned things which has the capacity to produce effects. And in the Abhidhamma texts, again, the same term is used as unique characteristics of the phenomena. So you can have a common general characteristics of a particular phenomena and a unique characteristics of that particular phenomena. The same term, svalakshana, is used. And here, So Tsongkhapa says that these two usage of the term is very different from what is being negated in the context of emptiness here, which is the intrinsic existence.
나는 이게 다 돼. 누가 군다들 해지지. 정도지. 숨수 때는 어떻게 군다 해지 사대. 군다 사대. 저 해지 같은 좀 지디가리야. 아니 좀데 다좀더스는 리포거니. 뒤에서 리포거니. 가다 해지기 때문에 리아 고법에 라치하지. 배를 샤샤나 말아서 소샤 튼튼튼지 기울이야 나오 냐베 로지기야 이렇게 나오 냐베 로티 미국 나디에 그 리스로 와 줄겐기 풍불로 와 줄겐기 나치데 여대바 너무 로를 실거라 다는 신가디 나 sensitive 심령에 진행에 로지도와 다디 로 생기리요시 다 진득이 아니 나디 다 예배도 주지거니 아니 따로 차샤나 나래 다 모두고 겨운 것인다게 지금 랜드에 들어온 되겠어 아니 루심 이부디 체치그래 저다 나사벌레 아니 천진용야다 드사벌레 치모냐 생기디 아니 소보보다 내 용어보 루슨도 만들지기 루슨을 와주겠디 그 루슨도 만들지기다 고도 사바체니 아니 풍불의 전심에 다 드셔요. 뜻운다고 그래서 세상 그녀라면 좀더 잘해 나래야 다대 신유 죽고 지나니스 다야고는 지나 체인도잖아요. 다대 신유 주에 죽행기 더주디 아니 모두가 좀 더지체 다대 신유 고베 좀 더지 남배 좀 더체 도송도와 저다 대지대도 모두가 좀 네 아트마스 되는데 다 가다 다도 생기 지금 다도 다와디 봐 때문에 놓아야지 자소 다한다 지나도 웨스턴 리전스를 미들 이스트 리전스들이 아니 다 가서 이슈에 가지리 주디즘에 그래서 망설을 하고 사물로 소울사지 소모도와 아주 미지디 아니 자살을 주고 소울디 사유리야 있는데 냐루리야 있는데 다 도시 부부의 전심에 따지 되도록 다티 주주주라 되게 다도 좀 되면도가 좀 됐건다고 그랬어 아마데 생기지 무슨 순절을 해요 다 15코알로 코야기 gen생이 생기기 지고 그랬어 조조도 생기기 된적이 차이인 거야. 자상가다 우면 슝게 시베 싸워 제행게 임무 된진 고야 돼. 생기기 지어서 오는 식이 유지 고고야 그랬어. 그래서 생기 고고에 샬래야 딸이 야가다 볼이야 아니 군다 가서 그게 가서 고야 돼. 용대 그랬어. 조조 생기 된진기 신유대 모습을 되고 그랬어. 다 되길로는 시지 가서 그게 각도도 차지 봐. 고야 차이도잖아. 내가 각자들 루이로 맞춰와. 각자 넘버 로로 맞춰와. 된 곡점들이 용구도와 뒤주는 소야들이 딱 그런 말해 보세요. 무민지만이 소원은 시 딱 그런 거 가다撞到落地其实大概有开始有呢这个结果是第那么落了马上啊定过呀的有嘛的就算是这样的这高生问题现在送下咱的高生作为呢电子的高生来的因为电子开完了电子的是说有的没办法呢电子人数开多了有的没办法马到呢我记住了落可的去呢로티 지도 소원을 지금 되는데 매번 마셔봐도 지로로 너무 말아. 자들이 이르사네 그 댄진 지로가 로티 다발이야 대치더수에 신유디 단 나바지 주부요래 신유디 캐고요래 쓰지.
So the distinction between the innate forms of grasping and intellectually acquired forms of grasping through critical reflection is an important one. So the innate forms of grasping is really present in all sentient beings, and it's based upon the basic notion of some kind of, I am, the thought that I am, some kind of self, notion of self. And so this is something that occurs naturally, and it's really kind of part of the basic constituents of what makes a sentient being. And that kind of some form of the thought that I am is really this notion of self is present, as a sort of an innate structure. And if you look at this, the content of that and of that character of that grasping, it's sort of basically there is a sense that somehow there is a real me or some kind of notion of true self that is somehow the owner of what makes our body and mind and the various attributes of our sentient nature. And this is at a very fundamental level shared by all sentient beings. Now, what the intellectually acquired grasping really refers to those types of postulations and ideas that are built upon this basic grasping itself and which reinforces them, and where critical thinking is brought into the kind of consideration. So, for example, among the great Indian traditions, the ancient Indian traditions, because they all share in the belief in karma across lifetimes and also the concept of rebirth. And then since the understanding is that the body and the mind that we have is ephemeral, it is contingent upon a particular life, and there must be something more eternal, something more stable and constant, and that is somehow independent of the body and mind and mental processes that make up our existence. Because karma, there must be something, a principle that is responsible for the karma and also is the one who's going to experience the consequences of the karma. Since the body and mind constantly is in flux, there must be something more enduring, something that is more constant. And this is the basis for the belief in Atman, referred to as Atman or true self. And essentially what this kind of view of self does is to reinforce what is there already in the form of an innate grasping. We also find similar, acquired notions of self in the Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, Muslim, Judaism, where there is this idea that, at the time of after death, we are responsible for our actions and we will be judged. And as a result of the judgment, we either will be, heaven will be our fate or hell will be our fate. So there is that again, not necessarily fully articulated, but there is a notion of a soul or Atman in the Indian language that is more enduring, that is more constant. And again, this kind of view builds upon what is already there, an innate grasping at self. And therefore, Jamyang Shepa in his root lines on the Indian philosophies really make the point that it's on the basis of either negating or reinforcing our grasping at self, Buddhist and non-Buddhist schools evolved in India. So in other words, Buddhist schools are there to negate the object of the grasping of self, and the non-Buddhist schools tend to really strengthen and reinforce that object of grasping, which is the self. So in the subsequent sections of this text, the Tsongkhapa points out that since the primary object of cultivating the view of emptiness is to really, destroy the basis for the cyclic existence, samsaric existence, and and what is at the root of samsaric existence is this innate grasping. It is not the intellectually acquired grasping that is the fundamental object of negation. It is really this innate grasping which then supports the intellectually acquired grasping. And so the central objective of a meditator is to really try to recognize, understand how this innate grasping operates, and then try to undermine that innate grasping by negating the content of that grasping, which is the self. And as a means to that, one can also negate the intellectually acquired concepts of self as a means towards that end. But the ultimate aim, primary aim, really is to undermine the innate grasping and to really negate the content of that innate grasping. And so therefore, what is required is some conceptual understanding of what is the content of that grasping. For example, Shantideva says in its Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, without identifying what is to be negated, without having some image or understanding or concept of what is to be negated, you cannot succeed in the negation of that thing. So what is required is some understanding that even hypothetically speaking, if things were to possess inherent existence, what it would look like. So one needs to have some understanding, and then that will be one will be able to then negate that. So that is an important step.
풍부 담을지면서부터 저 주의 등진 그 시체 에는 가사가 된지 게임 우리 신송셔야 돼. 나서 로리야 나 슬럽도 당시 미지 민네 독성 대 민생 나서도 되잖아요. 풍부로 유도 샤야고네 나 신로라 샤야고도 사들이 되잖아요. 롤독 소원도도 가사가 된지셔야 되게 심어도디 가사 강도 다베시 풍소 때문에 좀 된지 취이 당신 게 시체를 또서 먼지 가사가 된지 게임이었지. 다들이 인도 고불로 주기 지시 풍부를 지요. 디지털 먼지였어. 전에다 송샤디. 러지부 면적이 가사가 당진다 취이 당진 이후에 그게 가서 차라샤네. 취이 당진 시주르샤. 가사가 당진 윤주르샤. 제 도수는 전에 고불로 주기 아니 가사가 당진 지침 가사가 다음에 지침을 시발라 가사 가도 다시 풍소 때문에 떠버리고 그래서 풍부 때문에 주에 된지기 신이 수충 못통의 지기 가사 된지기 신이 수도 말했어요. 소도가 저자마다 뒤디 거기다 가서 롤도 상담나 직시해야 돼. 말은 좀 별로 되라 차라만 구시도가.
So when we try to develop the understanding of what is this content of our grasping at self that needs to be negated, we should relate this to our own experience of how a sense of self arises. And if we are able to do that, we will recognize that there are actually many different layers to this grasping at self. One form of grasping will arise where there will be a notion that somehow self is the master and the mind and body that are the basis of that self is somehow its servants. And just as in a master-servant relation, the servant is more deferential to the master, and master is not deferential to the servants. So in the same manner, in our sense of self, we will recognize somehow this self enjoys a kind of a more prior status, and then the body and the mind that are part of our existence are somehow at its kind of service, and they are serving this self. And and you can see this, for example, like in our everyday thoughts, like if we think about our own sense of identity, we can talk about when we were young, when we were small, and now when I'm old. All of these stages in our life are really posited on the basis of the aging of our body. So when we think of, in my sense of self, although we have a temporal sense, I don't feel that this old body was present when I was 10 years old. Whereas when you think about your own self, sense of self at an early age, you have memories like when I was such and such age and at such and such a place. It is not the old body that you will transport to that period of time. Rather, you project yourself to that time, and there is a kind of a unity that you presuppose. And underlying this is somehow a notion that while the body changes, this true me, the self, remains constant. So you can see already there is a kind of a priority accorded to the basis of the notion of self and the so-called self. So even there you can see kind of a difference. And this is a kind of a natural. It's not something that we have intellectually acquired. It's a natural kind of sense of self. Similarly, you can also have a different kind of sense of self where the self is identified with the mental and the physical attributes. For example, you may identify it with a particular experience. I'm this and I'm that. And at that time, you don't really differentiate between your body and yourself. You identify with your body. So in that kind of notion of self, there is a kind of a, almost like a kind of a conflation of the basis of sense of self and the self itself. So you can see that already in our innate, naturally occurring thoughts of self, there are different layers and complexities built into this. And underlying all of this is really a kind of a very, very primitive or basic impulse of believing in the inherent existence of a real me, inherent in intrinsic reality. And that really underpins all of these other forms of grasping. So, and when we think about, even when we think about some other person, say a given name, we cannot think of that person abstract. Something of that person has to arise in our mind, whether the body or face or something about that person, in order even to have the thought of that person. So what this indicates is that the sense of self really is contingent upon some kind of basis, physical or mental. So therefore, as long as there is some grasping at the basis, such as the physical and mental constituents, the notion of self will always arise. And here Nagarjuna says that as long as there's grasping at the aggregates, the grasping at self will arise. So this, as Nagarjuna points out, that in order to fully understand, although some commentators of Nagarjuna, like Bhava Viveka, makes the distinction between what is to be negated in the context of person and in the context of the aggregates, but Nagarjuna himself makes it very clear that so long as there is a grasping at the aggregates, grasping at self will naturally arise. In order to develop full understanding of the notion of no self of the person, one also have to dismantle the basis of that arising of the sense of self, which is the grasping at the aggregates, our body and mind as well.
자다가 등진이디 다 강사가 등진이 윤주블샤 통매 머리 보사도 강사가 등진블샤 아니 최지 등진이 시들샤 전에 다져보고 막 토발이야 최지 등진 방고 말했지 최지 다음에 또 말했어 그때 숨겨 자, 드리는 전에 다민이 조다디 먼저 차. 다민이 차라샤. 봐. 아들이야, 이네. 너 잡에 주지. 넘부 줄 거네. 다 사주에 너네마. 지수 사상 보는데 내가 리기원에 쓰이는 거지. 로도 쓰이는 거 말이지. 어느 로도 가지고 쓰이는 거잖아. 사트 먹어도 싫어. 사 주고 먼저 좋아. 먼저 채는다. 지금 DJ가 사트 몇 건네. 대중도 서로랑 사과기로 쓰네. 송샤다 되게 너도 사주거든. 송샤 되게 공부 되게 간다. 냐라라에 추기다면 또 봐. 여버려셔스. 기진 연락셔도 또 오면은 사탕고 때 추기다면 또 여래. 가사주고지. 지금에 냐랑게 아니 지금 또 배우고 있잖아요. 사탕부터 대장 로도 쓰이는 도리스. 직송. 다 제가 전에 있잖아요. 아니 풍부다 벌심 된지 지시도 예버 지시도 가사 때문에 좀 우리도 내일잖아요. 가사라면 소월 또 두고 말했어. 진짜 두송도 와. 다 디디 제가 시원하면 제가 잡았다. 냠냠하게 하는 송셔가지. 당 로비 현장에서 저 냠냠 매스를 돼 가고 있다. 간담이 송당 것도 진짜 차 되게 하래. 저한테 인도 대켜봐도가 다 애니 다민이를 잘 매스. 다민들은 좋은 남자 치다 가서 예언님이서 케시 캐버리어 이두산에 가사를 치다면 샤워를 마도 케시 강사다 취이 때도 가서 강고에 가서 쳐야 말이지. 내일은 가서 돼 까고 가서 돼 동배 진일이 쳐야 말이지.
So the other commentators like Bhava Viveka, as explained before, makes a categorical distinction between selflessness of person and selflessness of phenomena. And selflessness of person is understood to be coarser forms of grasping compared to the the grasping at selfhood of phenomena. And therefore, grasping at selfhood of person is considered to be part of the afflictive obscurations, and grasping at selfhood of phenomena is considered to be part of the subtle obscuration to knowledge. And in this way, distinction is made in Bhava Viveka's writing, but Chandrakirti really takes this to task and explains that, citing the Sutra of the 10 Bodhisattva levels, 10th Bodhisattva level, where Chandrakirti explains that on the first Bodhisattva bhumi, a Bodhisattva is able to outshine the non-Bodhisattvas, the other Arya beings, by means of the kind of inclination to the Mahayana path, the Buddha nature. But at that stage, the Bodhisattva is still not able to outshine the realization of the Sravakas and by means of the wisdom. And the point being made here is that insofar as the wisdom of emptiness is concerned, there is no difference between the first Bodhisattva level Bodhisattva and Shravaka, who is an Arya being. And furthermore, Chandrakirti points out, as explained before, that so long as there is some form of grasping at the aggregates, the physical and mental constituents, there is always going to be a basis for the grasping at selfhood, some notion of a person, some notion of a self. And therefore, Chandrakirti concludes in his Entering the Middle Way, saying that the two selflessnesses are not differentiated on the basis of what is being negated. They are differentiated only in relation to the basis upon which the selflessness is presented. If the selfhood is negated in relation to the person, that is the selflessness of person. And if the selfhood is negated in relation to phenomena, such as the aggregates, which is the basis for the notion of a person, then that constitutes selflessness of phenomena. So there is no subtlety of what is being negated between these two. The only difference is the basis upon which the selfhood is negated. And in this way, Chandrakirti really points out that there is no subtle difference of subtlety between these two forms of selflessness.
다 예별 루스체니 최적 말이지 쇼카다카이네 낭좀 대 무슨 걸 다든잖아 야야 말이지 다데 친구류 자전인 곳 저자다 친구 사야다 란다를 쓰냐 스스로 라라서 스스로 다데 저자가 친구 다 가서도 가서 그래 즉 삼바타야 서로 즉다 주시타야 서로 다 될 친구 쓰라고 친구 류스로나 친구를 수도 류 전에 캐시 친구 캐시 류스는 샤트야 되는지 다가는 저 자제지 고스를 전에 자전 거다가 자전 쓰기 있는 전에 캐시 자전 캐시 고스를 돼요 말이지 이내 마다 맞으면 안에 친구를 자전지 고스를 독해서 어떤 때든지 강사가 참배 다가는 신규 강사들이 풍속을 시작하다 가이네 마다 맞으면 안에 타녀도 차선 대원에 아니 타녀 샤셔지 대상부터 요구쳐 대상부터 안에다 예말레스 다이네다 디야 점시 눈이 처음에는 소야래 타녀도 차고 임바 대라 타녀에 참으신지 문해봐 대소로 마세요 터널 주식을 시냐 문해봐스 타녀도 예미사에 뒤순 거잖아요 시도 다 또또 타녀도 차고 임바 대라 타녀에 참으신지 문해봐서 타녀도 차고 있네 참으신지 누구 타녀에 참으신지 너는 디케란드 다데 타녀도 매발 다 타녀도 차고 대라 타녀에 참으신지 문해가 주는 대상부터 요구치고요 저승 여단데 명성 다성선에도 대례마도 명도 다 주세 유의 그리스도 파 제가 싶어 있는 대코나이도 제거심벌이 에 군주비 쉐디 더 군주비 쉐서가 가르쳐 모니 주고 매가 인도잖아 다르잖아 니야베도 뜻이야 저서 배 친구들 다 대손 대쇼데 대손도와 대 디네 대코나다 되면서 캐라와 자제스 대다 뭐이나 구조 태바다 대바 뭐이나 대나 디 대코나니도 주기 구조도 민교로 태베 나버 잡아나 친구로 쏘고다 코나 미시고 뭐인데 어느 지시는 첩을 주에 태베 수도 소화로 쏘고 남자 여보 뭐인데 저자제 친구로 쏘고 신 구조도 여보 뭐인데 니도 캐라와는 둘라 저자야 뭐인데 니는 여보 뭐인노스 전에 다 다는 여버리 다 데이트 우주가 나리야 대니 등이 좀 지den도 남바 등기 줍주 미메기 남제 매버 지된 일인들 라가 야나 때는 도인자 다디 다 다녀도 작성 엔텔라 소스다 로 니버직성 다네 다랑 너가 매쟁에 미션식을 깨지더니 너가 매들지도는 딱 대성관에 여바샤주제 마도 여다디 팔문의 유미 자나 대코나이를 적어서는 니아요 말이스다 진루요.
So now having identified what constitutes grasping at selfhood or intrinsic nature and which is the object of negation, then Tsongkhapa goes on to explain in that case how do we understand the actual nature of existence itself. In what sense we can say things do exist. And here the text is not in the manual, but it's in the actual text where Tsongkhapa gives the analogy from everyday usage. And he gives two analogies. One is the pistol. It's the one that's a stone that is used for crushing things. I've been asked to put the mic closer to my mouth, but somehow it seems to be physically possible. So I don't know what I can do.
Kajol.
Can you help me? No, I don't want to hold it in my hand. Is it okay? Yeah, I got a note saying, can I push it closer?
I think now God sent indication. Now better stop.
Citing Chandrakirti from his clear words, Prasanapada, there are two analogies used to illustrate how does a Madhyamaka such as Chandrakirti understand the existential status of phenomena, because they are not rejecting everything. So then two analogies are presented. One is the pistol, the other one is Rahu, which is a mythical character that's, in the Indian kind of mythology. And pistol is this pestle. Is it pestle or pestle? Pestle. We can talk about, we can use language like the body of the pestle, but as if there is a pestle and it has a body, but basically it's the one and the same thing. Similarly, Rahu is a mythical character which is composed of only one head, but when we can also say Rahu's head, as if there is the other part of body of Rahu. And these kind of conventions work because that's the part of the convention, and you don't inquire further and go beyond and say, well, wait a second, you can't call Rahu's head because there's the only head there. So in the same way, Chandrakirti says, when we relate to everyday conventions of, cause and effect, our actions and so on, and our perception of the world, if we stay within the boundary of everyday usage, then this is, the transaction at the level of language and everyday experience operates, that functions. There's a kind of understanding, and at that level, everything will function. But if you move beyond that framework and try to inquire what exactly is that person, is that the body, is that the mind, and so on, then you are going beyond the boundary of conventional uses of language, and you're already delving into the ultimate analysis. And when you subject concepts to that kind of ultimate analysis, and if you posit something as in the aftermath of such analysis, it's always going to be something that presupposes inherent existence, presumes inherent existence. So any kind of notion of existence that is based upon that kind of ultimate analysis as, and arrived at through that kind of analysis, that is going to be some kind of postulation of essence or intrinsic existence. Whereas on the everyday level, language functions, and we don't ask beyond the normal assumptions of a shared language users, and at that level, on that level, cause and effects and all the relationships work. And so by using those two analogies, basically Chandrakirti is explaining how a language and our understanding of the world on the conventional level really works. And therefore, this kind of understanding of reality is referred to as mere words, mere designations, mere constructs, because we are simply relating to the world at that level and not going beyond it. And so it's not a question of anything goes. And in fact, Tsongkhapa, in his Lamrim Chemo, extensive exposition of stages of the path to enlightenment, he identifies 3 criteria that constitutes whether or not we can say something exists. One is that it should be familiar to the convention of the world, or convention. The second is that that convention should not be negated by another valid cognition or valid convention. And the third is that that convention should not also be negated by ultimate analysis or harmed by ultimate analysis. But the most important one is the first 2 criteria, that somehow it should be part of the convention, and also that convention should not be controverted or contradicted by another valid cognition. And on that basis, one can speak about something exists and something does not exist, and so on.
Subodh Sungwadi, Pera Samzabe, Lungjidaga Samzabe, Kansa, Tangzun Zani, Niegua Jigla, Shisha Cheche. Any Yi Namshi, Jigda, Sami Shibango, the Yada Jin, Monguchani, Mate Chai Zane, any Kushinamshi Saji, Sut Shabreta, Kazak Senshila. Or that tea, Tangzun Zani, any that, very never lose in Shabachin Zane. Tanya Juji is with a quiet as a cow study. Tanya Juju, Kushukoya, don't call it. So the ladies and Tana Juji is with study.
So the importance of listing the third criteria, that it should not be controverted by ultimate analysis or ultimate inquiry, is to really deal with philosophically postulated ideas, such as mind-only schools' postulation of alaya, the stored consciousness, which is very difficult to negate by using everyday conventional form of reasoning. It can only be negated by getting to the ultimate analysis. So that's the main significance of this. And earlier I forgot to translate one section where His Holiness cited a stanza from Chandrakirti's Entering the Middle Way, in the section on selflessness of person, where he says that, that this intrinsically real self cannot be found either on the ultimate level nor on the conventional level when you subject the concept of person to the sevenfold analysis.
자상하다. 딱 모니기면은 일단 민두가 시대 러시아들 말했다. 타냐도 여시랬어. 타냐도 여시야 돼. 민대 샤송랬어. 딱 디가네 되는 거야. 딱 민대 샤송 간에 치면이나 나도 타냐에 넘사 먹고 싶으셔. 샤도도. 그러다 타냐에 넘사 샤샤버도 돼. 그 가서 그게 최대한테 다 남샤게 다 남을샤게 다 텐테다테 다들 전에 예배로 세배이나 마대시라 용되지 다 차지해서 뭐 세배 균정 모습 뭐 세배 뒤는 대망 다다 뒤서 못 참배. 진짜 뭔구지 마다 마셔랑 안에 타냐도 자수를 가는 샤시고 마도 다들 전에 니들 참니다.
So, in fact, although someone might object to the Madhyamaka standpoint that the conclusion that nothing exists that possesses any inherent or intrinsic reality, one might say, in that case, how can we understand the reality of things? That nothing will be tenable. And here, in fact, it's the opposite. When you reject the need to ground our understanding of the world on some kind of objective basis, arrived at through a critical inquiry, like the philosophers, if you reject that need and is contented by the kind of the structure and framework and the boundaries or norms of everyday convention, and within that convention, then we can really maintain a robust notion of reality. Within that framework, all the things about cause and effects, subject and object, agent and act, and the action and so on, all of these can be sustained. On the other hand, if we feel the need to ground these notions in some kind of objective reality by pushing the conventions further and further, then, as explained before, even the concept of time breaks down. Time is composed of 3 temporal stages, and if you try to see what is the real present, what is the real past, and what is the real future, the notion of time, gets dismantled. Similarly, cause and effect, if you try to find what exactly is the cause, what is the true cause, and what is the true effect, and so on, again, the whole notion breaks down. Similarly, action, the agent, and the object of action and so on. But on the other hand, if you don't feel that urge to really ground it in an objective basis, then all of these conventions are perfectly fine. No. So they're like the concept of 3 times and so on. So if you don't, kind of succumb to the need to ground them in objective reality and remain in the conventional usage of language, then there is no problem.
Ben Tusum Shenjane, Ben Kosore, David century, Tadar century, Mongbe century, Laguero. That the Tanya Dasa, 20 million, David century, Yelena. Other Tadar century, Mongbe century, Yelena. Tadar century, Lodja, Kambuti, Tatoyushu. That does a pedal turn, Sheduzane, Tatawe Dawa, David Dawa, Mongbe Dawa Shadow. That dog, Hoipa. 다 샤간 집이나 아니 나와 다들 나와 지나러라 연대모 샤도도 그래서 그때서 소설 때는 샤가지마도 그 대매를 타네 다다와 힘을 샤도도.
So for example, we spoke about the time, so we can say past century, the present century, and future century, and that makes perfect sense. But then if you try to pinpoint it and go beyond this conventional understanding, and then say the present century. The present century will be composed of 100 years, and then, each of the year part of the present century, because as the years come, the previous years will be no more. So in that way, once you try to go to the granular level and try to ground the concept of present century to some kind of objective basis, the whole notion falls apart. And then, for example, when we say this year, the present year would be composed of 12 months, and the present month will be composed of 30 or days, and each day will be composed of hours. And if you go in that in this kind of mode, you won't be able to ground anything, and the whole notion of time and present and so on breaks down. However, if we are content with the kind of norms of convention, and then accept these notions as part of the convention, just our constructs and our convention, then you can talk about all of this without problem.
Oh yeah. That the 타이어도의 랑세 미시비 인도자네 아니 남샤 몽구 지다 저다 투모이 뭐 차는 거야. 디디 저다 대보시 차는 것도. 당연히 저 유전자 미시오사의 지금 거야. 주스는 참여 주야게 참여주도 투나오고 말이 있잖아요. 시장 투나오면 디식셔도. 다가는 신기 시버 사게 가서 그렇게 딱 하나 단다지 열어봤다디 아니 거를 유중면에 두대버시 뭐이나 아니 다 시버 기지 가서 그렇게 직유체디 가차를 삼았다 가다 최디는 가차를 아니 드리인들도 시버스는 로리아 그게 딱 걸어 매들지 나 아니 따뜻이 내가 서로 따뜻이 셔디가 다 민그 탄력이 왕게 여봐시네 상당히도 전에 아니 다 그디 가서 저기 지고도 시버 지고스는 다다와도 마음 붙여 시버스는 대가체 자 드리인들 전에 지고디 규제어로다 기지 지금 메타보드 규제어로 저자가 지고 규제가 있잖아요 규디 가서 저기 지고 주변 내급도 시버로 자 뒤에 규제가 지르샤스 규제가 신고그랬어 개디 지고도 시부에 왔더니 지고 규제가 시부 규제가 말이 지고 주변 내급을 따고 가서 가서 거기 처지는 가사를 때는 가게 요만 쓰니 러이나 원나 깨와디 규제버디 깨스버디 규제화면도가 아니 깨와디 깨와 주드셔버리 깨버디 주드셔 말이시는 요치는 지셔야지도 자 도센다 제인산에 아니 시고 두시 시분 두셔버리 디 시분 두셔버리 다 내기 파자 구시스제니 그게야 이 가서 체질이 나버셔서하고 배 윤도 저등의 지간에 상다로 야 구시스 남시스는 샤티아 되는 거 가다 다 강사 다유 좀 셔러다 자 다유 마점디 파자 땡이 파자 구시샤 그도 그다 이 셔버디 아니 가서 차이 파자 구시 샤 땡도 파자 구시 마점디 가는 샤지 지도 뭐 상다나 되고싶도 사실은 이 전에 나한테 내려들 근데 남산 교당 투모 모임인데 지금 어디가 어디 사고로 투서돼 오케이 다녀도야 랑전 미시가 딱 대투되기도 아니 대주 투모 모임에다 누루 지 캘레마다 캘레박스는 신나시 캠벨을 붙여야 된다 소야시도가 그래서 쉬우상다 샤디 뭐냐 전에다 투서돼 랑전 미시가 민대 상상 디간에 여기 조인스한테 어디 용기하래 다데 아니 가서 저기 도 니치나라 아니 다 책지 좀 좀 되잖아요 쑥 동반이지 동을 시지 쑥니 동반이 상세네 전에 동시 최전 그게 뭐니지 주고 싶게 샤베이나 디 단단바로 모니 뭐 주스 로인드잖아요. 디샹동 거를 내고도. 수코라. 다들 얘기해도 모니 주 동을 로인드잖아요. 아니 다들 자단데 낭선 대마심으로 다들 자니 니야메도 다 디간에 아니 셰인드잖아요. 다 숙니 동반이도 사고 딱단로 되도. 아니 뭐 시원이 다 왔던데 하는 게 쑥도 먹고 또 뭐니 쑥쑥 살도 딱다 뒤고야지도. 다 들이 상담하게 경제다 그거지 자신은 소는 시리 아니 가다디 이거 주주변의 지금 이거 주주변의 지나로라 동료들 주변이나 내제 성단 대발은 너무 도시 지민 중스 믹스에 지금 하베이나 대단 대세니 그게 신진들이 되게 신진들이 저기 아니 취미식 남도 쫓아야 돼요 내가 지금 미국에 타다 식링들잖아요 아니 마다 마셔랑 안에 지금 남산 좋아서 때라 민영에 특별직 그게 유인원의 여버디 마사르산 게임을 올로 뒤들이 아니 누구 정도 되지 나가다 카요라요 거기 등진생인데 어떤 동네 거짓말 스토리 섬체 좋아 어다 러시아에 시를 롯데기 그 카요로 도스제기였다 취미식 남도 쫓아다는 계획을 롯데도 그네 취미식 남도 쫓아다는 그게 로직이들 데 그게 가서 나밖에 매체 도와 근데 저자 다른데 어떻다
So once the Prasangika's unique understanding of So once Prasangika's unique understanding of the final view of Nagarjuna's teaching on emptiness is really understood, which is the rejection of intrinsic existence, even on the conventional level. Once that central point is really understood, then based on that, there emerges kind of unique standpoints on other important issues of philosophy. For example, one of them is the rejection of autonomous syllogism that we spoke about earlier, how where the kind of those who believe in intrinsic existence somehow propose a kind of reasoning where the three main members of the argument, the subject, the predicate, and the reason, somehow are established by a valid cognition of a commonly shared valid cognition that somehow relates to the intrinsic nature of these facts. So that kind of autonomous syllogism is rejected. And furthermore, according to this system, this understanding, there is a new way of understanding the cessation of conditioned things. So in mainstream Buddhist thought, both cessation and arising, the arising and the ceasing, are both understood to be conditioned phenomena. They are kind of consequences of causes, but most other Buddhist schools recognize the actual seized fact to be a kind of an unconditioned. Ceasing is conditioned, but seized, the result is understood to be an unconditioned. But in this particular unique understanding of Chandrakirti, even both the ceasing and also the cessation itself becomes a conditioned phenomena, which then offers a way of understanding how the continuity of the karmic propensities and imprints are maintained without having to presuppose a kind of a constant basis, like a store consciousness, like alaya, which remains like a kind of a supporter of the karmic imprints. And in this way, the kind of the mere notion of I am can continue to serve as the basis of the imprints that are brought across. And all of these are really consequences of this fundamental tenet, which is the rejection of intrinsic existence or intrinsic nature, even on the conventional level. And these other consequences emerge from this. So therefore, for example, in Tsongkhapa's writing, sometimes there is a reference to 4 main tenets of negation, rejection, and 4 main tenets to be upheld or affirmed. So these are and so on. So when you understand along these lines, then what you read in the sutras, such as in the 25,000 lines on the perfection of wisdom, would make sense, where there is a statement where the Buddha says that it is not the case that the emptiness, it is not the case. So it is not the case that the form is made empty by the understanding of emptiness, because the form itself is empty. And this kind of understanding is important because otherwise sometimes you get the idea that somehow you leave the form untouched and then you imagine some kind of constructed reality and imposed upon it, and then you negate that. And that becomes a kind of a shentong type emptiness of the other. Whereas the point is that the form itself has to be understood to be empty. And when you understand in this way, then the statements in Heart Sutra, where the Buddha says that form is emptiness and emptiness is form. So there is an equation made. So these kind of statements will really then have a real meaning. So then, of course, as explained before, the purpose and the significance of all of this is to really ultimately undo, dismantle any basis that could serve as an objectification, that would serve as a basis for objectification. For example, in 60 stanzas of reasoning, Nagarjuna says that any mind, states of mind that upholds some kind of locus, why wouldn't the afflictions, the poisons of the afflictions not arise in that mind? The point being, so long as you have some objectifiable basis left that is not dismantled, there's always going to be a ground for objectification and grasping. Whereas if you dismantle, if you destroy any basis for objectification, then there is nothing to support the arising of the afflictions such as attachment, anger, and so on. So, and as explained before, that emptiness, the understanding of emptiness, is really a very efficient, it's almost like an efficient person who is able to support and reinforce the constructive part of our mind, such as compassion and so on, which does not require a kind of a grasping onto a kind of a projected phenomena, whereas it undermines and destroys all the afflictions that presupposes grasping at some kind of intrinsic existence. So in this way, the view of emptiness really serves a great purpose for the practitioner.
Oh yeah, that in the that Tanyadoya Rangze Mishibe, and Umabe, that Tanyado Rangze Shegang Umabaria, Mixereta, Pugay, drawing Naya Karnaya Slavina, da, and the teaching of Guvitri, Paganyam Shong Mubunjiku Tower. And Asadi Jimini, Tanya the Bajibu Jesuit Tower, and it turned them a Yawamiku Tower. And then Dole, Randon Sunku Meteor Tower, Tower City, Tower Sumche, or Jeva Kakani, and then Randon Sunku Meteor Tower, so that Tower City. Did they do?
So then we move on to page 46, where the Prasangika that rejects any notion of intrinsic reality, even on the conventional level, then levels consequences, critique to those who, while being a Madhyamika, still accepts the notion of intrinsic existence on the conventional level. And Chandrakirti levels four main critique or arguments against this. And this is from page 46.
Oh yeah, that day. Tell us about Paganyam Shong Jiku Tawani, Kadam over Namla, Ranka Sini Drube, Ranshiji Yanas. That Manazo Kansa Senshi, Ishi Shai Duzane, that Tanya to Mada Majave, that Minted Disa, Kansa did Disa. Take some of the Musimba. Kansa said the Kavatado, could Zegua. Zeni, Senshi Jinamshi, the Kansa Senshi Shai Gurba. Saturday into Zane, Takasade. Saturday into that Kansa, any Kora, you money, that you have Guyana, Pagway Nyamshaki, any Yimbu Papa to see you to Zane, Nyamsha number Medogwe, Lope, what do you give a Nicola? Good now, he didn't got to. Didn't give in to your order. Sazanga, Kasa, Nandalam, Migo Totus, Samsabe, the Shigara, so the name is Zane, the Nyamung, what do you give a Nicola, Chasing a Java didn't got to her. 산다 개디 최전 랑은 주버지 예배이나 디디 내루스다 로고 태고가래 근데 인도 내루서요 로티 몰라 디니에 거발라 다 내루서요 르 자이르잖아 잡아서 신뢰해야 돼 아니 네 가서 뭐부터 지고 있길로 주고 냠샤 냐버 마샤콜라 뭐부터 뭐요거는 여대버지 나좀 대랑 뭐 뭐지 그게 발문된 주고도 쓰셔야 되지 디 뭐란 게 둘루이나 땅을 둘루 신들이 봐 째레 로팅 몰라 니거 발라 미니버티기 다 파wen서 무지기 차도도 즉시시
So the first of these four consequences, three from the root lines and one from the auto commentary. The first of these is on page 46 where we read, the first of these is called the consequence that the noble equipoise would destroy a phenomena. The point being made here is this, the Arya noble beings' meditative direct realization of emptiness when in their meditative equipoise is a state of mind where the emptiness, that the ultimate nature of all phenomena is realized directly. And so if, as the Madhyamaka Svatrantikas propose, things and events possess some kind of intrinsic nature, then this intrinsic nature will become their real mode of being. And if it is their true mode of being, then the Aryas, the wisdom of the noble being, who's realizes the ultimate truth of all phenomena directly, should be able to perceive this. And since they do not perceive it, it almost seems as if the Arya's wisdom causes the destruction of the nature of all phenomena. So that's one consequence.
Oh yeah. That's other. Any more tending money to be Javaina? Any pa Tanya Chidi, Patos, Nangsam Demaime, could to look into the Pato, saying to Zane, Nijuvaina, and the Tanya the just was those.
And then the second consequence is on the last paragraph of that page, which is the second of the four. A second consequence, the consequence that conventional reality could withstand analysis. The point is that if, all phenomena possesses some kind of intrinsic reality, and since that intrinsic reality will become the defining essence of that phenomena, then even the conventional reality should be able to withstand ultimate analysis, and which is something that Madhyamaka Svatrantikas also do not accept. So it's a form of a consequence.
내 통호 쉐버데를 쳐다 가사가 타냐다. 디디나면도 그러면 삼주. 딱 그게 자지나리었다. 슈슈데. the subject 그래서 이제 대상적 고수 투모모인 것이지.
대상적 고수스러운.
이소. 다들 타와 손파네. 타와니 버진다. 타와니 버지 주대. 되나? 저는 요걸로 쏘고. 저는 요거 껴 셔거든요. 통 셔버들 쳐도 강사게 타냐. 자. 타냐를 쳐야 누가. 리베나 누가. 다 요거 사서 제 신을 껴 셔거든. 다 신기. 자유기 다 통 셔버다고 다 간다. 전직 면에 주에 교대 genji 깨버리, 저 깨버리. 전직 면에 주에 내 통종스 러버이나 다 들어 이렇게 내용 그래서. 자, 자유기 다 통 셔버 타냐는 강로 타냐 셔버 전지 지저유 자와나 미니벌 캐버를 매장 지저 따고신지 된 여바로 참아신지 넣으면 신도 채 나만이니 마다 마셔방에 샤워때 타냐도 열라스 저 강섭시 다시제네 전쟁의 여버지 지네 탄에 제셔버들라 탄에도야 매도스 대야 리시기 내버다 리시기 잼에서버니기 개버다 리시기 예벌 많이 해버다 매벌 통원이기 개벌 신도 쳐와 레고로 쳐봐라 라데 스산의 신도 개버시했음도스 다 상도시면 송야리 산다 간다 리시기 잼에서버 네가 찍어야지 이내 또 찍고들라 나마 마다 맞으려는 샤시부터 리시기 누구야 말해 리시기 잼에서버도 리시기 누구야 말했어 다 자유기 다 통사로 자유기 규격을 러윈도잖아 다 재미있어서 맞아요 저 내용이 이거 내용이지
So in this section where Tsongkhapa presents the second consequence of Chandrakirti against the notion of intrinsic existence being on the conventional level, where he says that the conventional realities will be able to withstand ultimate analysis. And here Tsongkhapa makes the point, for example, if we say a sprout is growing, or shoot is growing, or I saw this and I saw that. And similarly, if someone says substantially real sprout grows from its seed, or substantially real person sees this phenomena. So in the former case, that kind of usage is part of the everyday convention where you don't go beyond the notion of what is meant in an everyday language. So I saw this, I saw that. Whereas the second kind of usage of language, like a substantially real person saw this, is going beyond the boundary of conventional usage of language. So in both of these cases, although their true reference may not be findable, whether in the conventional usage or in this more ultimate kind of usage, but the difference is that the second kind of usage will be negated by ultimate analysis, whereas the first kind of usage, the conventional usage, may not be established by ultimate analysis, but at the same time it cannot be negated by ultimate analysis because the discourse is occurring at the level of conventional truth, not at the level of ultimate truth. So then Tsongkhapa goes on to say that therefore one must distinguish between whether or not something can withstand ultimate analysis and whether or not something is negated by ultimate analysis. And in this context, he says that one needs to be able to distinguish between whether something is found through ultimate analysis and whether something has been negated by ultimate analysis.
어느 민그 탄제 요원가 마셔봐 되니서 디샴데 이 탄제도 가지고 계속 태워 다가 나를 싸운다 그래 민그 탄제 요원가 마셔고 저기 강사 참여 줘야 미줄라 민그 탄제 요원가 강사 탐제 장 구조도 요것도 봐야 민노세 이소
나라스
이소 이슈고데 어느 민그 탄제 요원가 마셔고 진짜시 쩌냠나스 강사가 타냐 딱ပဲ되는데 랑그 생이 두나 된 코랑게 랑그 모니게 여버 송게 유전 타냐 왕게 된 유전 타냐 왕게 여버 마송에 유전 타냐 왕게 여버 모임베 된게 뭐네 여버 쩌버레스 쩌도스 대다와티 리시기 객장 취지기 통식을 타냐게 되면은 타냐베 체면 뇌베 여버네 둘라스 딱 무슨 냠용통에 시켜지로 전도 탄이 이기나네 전하는 오니게 이게 바로 마소와나 탄이 여왕게 이게 바로 의미지 두고 딱 들으셔 나도 사실이지 나래 다래 사실적인 게 라지 당고 숨에 주더라 대송도와 에네 유즈를 야나 랑은 거네 요거래 야나 탄이 여왕게 요거래 유즈 디니 와도 요 말했어 다 전쟁 문에 예배 그래서 유즈들라 리베 내용에 따지고 뒤도 쟁이잖아요. rikpe nayo res. Dine yindu kasa chukudi rikpe keptu, rikpe kehayo res. 다 민섬 다섬 지겠다 여bat 민거왕기 여bat지 다 디마도 샤서야 말이지 근데 이 사실은 사실 즉시 나도야 유즈니래는 만데스 유즈나마를 리그네베 유즈치마를 왜 매년도 로테이 쳐서 창을 차고 저거 딱고 랑생이 뭐도 인도산에 그 예배 두지지 위중은 시키냐 말아 다 타녀도 작성 다양한 다 시기 말도 면도가 다 드리인도 젊으시고 당도 치면 나리야 디수도가 서무 우면성으로 장배죠 최규롱 정신 매발라 견제 땡땡적과 까매장 단저 우매론이 이능시 대개 말을 때는 제스 다 지난으로 태기 말에 대원시 샤도 말에 이내 때대 우매론 때 인생은 다 직가서 우리 우주적인 대우를 해서 송도가 다디 지금 시간다 다백걸 송셰베 레범 니버 당근이 신이면 나라 어디 들다 전사이는 전화가 뭐니 이거 마소와는 타니 이번 게 이거 의미진 두고 사다지제 다디 수버전 제시가 사시지 나라 다 로테이 쳐서 창고사고 세수시도가 다르죠 그 지금 예배 두지지 유지면에 즉 자가 싶어이나 랑생 개랑고 그러다 저 랑생 타녀도요 깎고 쉬를 대 유지면에 다 예매가 참 치트야 편하게 지겠다 유진 타녀고 코네 왕게 있어 예번 줘야지 근데 이 민거 왕게 예번 코나마도 되니면에 예번 때네 매발이 삼바치다 로를 샤유인데 서로 구조돼야 돼 쉬우죠
So then we read, this is not in the manual program, says, and then Tsongkhapa asked the question, in that case, what is it that is being negated that is beyond mere words and mere designation? What exactly is being negated? Then he says that in the case with respect to a person, if the person ends up possessing some kind of intrinsic objective reality, then that is the object of negation. So, therefore, although, and this is something that is being negated by the ultimate analysis, but at the same time, the ultimate analysis cannot undermine the validity of everyday conventions, such as Devadatta sees this and so on. These kind of statements still will be valid because they are valid perceptions and cognitions that these statements can generate. And therefore, then he goes on to make a concluding statement, said that, so with respect to the existential status of phenomena, if the objective existence, existence by means of intrinsic nature, something possessing some kind of objective reality, becomes untenable, then there is no other alternative other than to say that the existence is understood only from a subjective point of view of our language, our designation, and so on. And so this same point is again made by Tsongkhapa in Lamrim Chemo. There is a verse where Tsongkhapa, when in the aftermath of presenting the Madhyamaka view, rejecting any notion of intrinsic existence, even on the conventional level, then there is a sort of a verse, like a respite, where he says that, those who are learned in the great classics of the Middle Way school, although in your mind, in a world devoid of intrinsic existence, the ability to posit cause and effect may be difficult, but you should uphold this standpoint as the middle way and follow it. In other words, basically saying that even though you might find it difficult, you should continue to struggle and maintain that challenge. Similarly, in his third major text on emptiness, which is the commentary on Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, Tsongkhapa says that when we think about the ways in which things can be said to exist, there are only two alternatives. One is to say things possess objective existence. So the existence can be defined by means of some kind of objective criteria. The other one is to say that it is more of a nominal subjective criteria based on our understanding and convention and norms of language. And since the first option is fraught with problems, the objectively defined criteria of existence is so fraught with contradiction and problem, we have no choice but to turn our mind towards the second alternative, which is the nominally defined, subjectively defined nominal criteria of existence. So when you combine all of these, then you can understand, what Tsongkhapa is getting at. And if we are able to even uphold this view and get a little glimpse of this, the power to affect our mind is truly forceful.
Oh, yeah. 다 공부하면서 뒤수고된 제시를 공부하면서 나눠야 이니가 가슬어야지. 우메다 타투가 가사야 디니도 수다들이.
And in the one of the later texts, Gompa Tsongkhapa's commentary on entering the middle way, elucidation of the intent, as explained yesterday, that Tsongkhapa makes the point that, in fact, the most difficult point and challenge of understanding the middle way philosophy is this: how do we maintain a robust notion of reality in the face of rejecting any notion of intrinsic reality, even on the conventional level? This is the most difficult challenge.
나 배정서学院의 denzi 상대 나리야. 지금 독립주의기 딴 능경 아주 비슷다 같이 대하게. 지금 직투제 denzi를 소들어야 되마 송네. 다 대주제기 즉 가서 denzi 대주제기 이네 denzi리야. 다 람란 로로 좀 있는데 캐오로 좀 denzi를 떠서 넣어야지. 이네 딱 간다. 민자 따유 삼아도 되는 거냐 저거 때문에 사버지기로 슉 잡고지기다. ningu rivedine ta temado ngone dosa mendo sambaji leinde eni tenzilo nyaji savshade chasanda tenzishande shugde de yongye 가서 풍불람이 나오시 대된도 가서 사지 다 지 풍부 지다 풍부도 직접 타다도 입도 초과도 사주 제지 시에는 더도 나데다 때 와서도 때내다 또 주대로 지기 팔면에 지기 여대로 지기 로를 샤대에 있나 디테질로 두고 맞다 다 풍불람이 나오시 대된도 가서 매가 진당 여신에 매가 진당 유전에 숨은 ям시 롱한데 진급 저 지직동스 전 다 뒤도 상담에 있는 된지는 넣으면서 다 도도 상담하나 아니면 다셔야 돼. 다 로망고 상담을 다 로망고 상담들의 시행주산에 애니 지금은 지 남주 집에도 또시 증셔놓고 애는 봐도 솔로 지차인 거예요, 소시도가. 근데 통용인데 애니 당 과대서야지. 애니 그 녀몽민주가 된데 그로 수충주산에 다데 녀몽민주가 건너 버지 예외이나 녀몽 애니 방배 저와지 여시와 상관지기. 애니 과대에서 송샤콜에 즉 섬려야지 네번이야지. 근데 이제는 타봤어야지. 근데 여서에 서버지 타야지. 야도가. 내가 양념 쇼보다 야마되네. 양념 순종시 야르다 되리. 누구 삼다도 또 어디 쉬어줘야. 들으시래. 다디 쇼데 더다 뭐 저거 믿고 타와. 제가 진득이 되는 거네. 이거지. 민자 따여서 못 되는 거네. 이거지. 루부데 내버이나 아니 더다 뭐 저거 믿고 타와서 저기요. 봐야네. 딱 하나 신기 상으로 걸려고. 다 되는 마찬가지. 아니. 다시 버디 안데디 디리 가서 셔노 랑도도 쓰고 미세가 타와서 다 어디 되게 쉽습니다리. 수 동반이 동미 수니 동반이다. 대양다 유수물리고 내가 송시를 뒤창에 나바타고 동반이 동미지디 더 동반이 다 동바장 쓰네. 다 송시들이 제가 간다 이 가서 주디 지민이 니치치디 세우시도 속도만이 도움이 속니 동반이랑 자디 어떻게 나시스 치는 참자로 다야 상계랑就是ci 상계 지위네 아니 디시셔버디 아니 동반이 도움이 디시셔버니 동반당스 말아서 마셔야 돼 나 각자 동반에 살지야 각자에 벌써 지금 사버샤 나디 링이 사버를 샤샤이나 나 모니도 차요 말에 나저 나디 아니 가서 또 책이 들었어요. 각자 다 동물을 모두 나디 이와레스도 시그로다. 근데 로로 쳐주로 거다 대가는데 뿌리 참무 진짜야 돼. 쉬게 해줘 버리셔. 어디 되시다? 다지 차려서 셔서.
So in Panjalama, Losang Chögyin's a text known as sort of a debating with self-grasping, there is a verse where he says that if you employ the reasoning such as absence of identity and difference and so on, if you are able to really kind of, reflect deeply upon them and apply these reasoning effectively, they may impact your innate grasping in one way or another. But what is more powerful is when you can really relate that to your own notion of self and use dependent origination as the primary form of reasoning, and to really kind of fine-tune your understanding of how the notion of self arises in relation to a person. Because sometimes, although in the Buddhist text we say that person is a construct based upon the physical and mental aggregates, but there is still sometimes the potential to reify a person as not necessarily identifiable with the physical and mental aggregates, but somehow dependent on them, but still enjoying some kind of, objective, identifiable status. And Panchen Lama is saying that what is needed is to really even take that and just dismantle that notion. And he says that if one is able to do that and reject any basis for the notion of person in this way and remain in that mere negation, just exclusion, just mere negation, and then without any impediments of mental sinking or mental laxity or mental excitation with a single pointedness, then it really brings a powerful force within one's mind in undermining grasping. So this is important, as I explained this morning. As a result of many years of contemplation on emptiness, once you are able to integrate this and relate this to your own perception of the world and your own experience, then, it begins to really loosen up this tight grip that we have in our grasping. It begins to loosen it up and makes it more relaxed. And when that happens, you begin to see that how it undermines any kind of gross emotional reactivity like attachment or clinging. And once that happens, then you can at least intuit that if that kind of temporary freedom from affliction's hold is possible, then there is a real possibility maybe true cessation, lasting cessation, and freedom from afflictions can occur. And in this way, you will develop a genuine kind of conviction that liberation is possible. A true liberation is freedom is possible. And in this way, there will be a real, a sense that, yes, now I can see this, I can intuit it, that there is a true possibility of liberation. To continue with the text, the third consequence leveled by Chandrakirti is on page 48, where he says that the consequence of the non-negation of ultimate production. Again, this is being leveled against Bhava Viveka, Madhyamaka Svatrantika, who accepts the Nagarjuna's teaching on non-arising of phenomena. So the point is that if you believe in some kind of objective intrinsic reality, even on the conventional level, then you will be subscribing to some notion of real arising of things. And then the final one is the consequence that the wrongness of the scriptural statement that things are empty by intrinsic existence. And this, in Tsongkhapa's text, he cites from Kashyapa Parivartan chapter, sutra, but I cited earlier this passage from 25,000 lines on the perfection of wisdom, which is quite powerful, which says that it is not the case that the emptiness makes the forms and so on empty, but the form themselves are empty. And the point being made here is that the real understanding of emptiness has to arise where the very nature and identity of the phenomena under investigation has to be addressed. Sometimes there is a danger that when we talk about emptiness of person, we might get the sense that somehow we leave the real me, untouched, and you imagine some kind of imagined construct that is to be negated over this, and you leave the actual reference of the term I am untouched. But in order to really have the impact, one has to actually address and challenge the nature of the self itself and how we conceive it, so that what is being negated is actually a distorted understanding of the nature of self, person itself, not some kind of imagined construct being brought from outside. So the point is, when you look at all of these various forms of arguments and reasoning, there is a real appreciation of the need to be so fine-tuned in our understanding of the teaching on emptiness.
다른 신기 이게 때문에 안다 나래 아니 거시 쓰지 송에 전에 좀 야왔던 저 쓰지 이런 거 대해서 거시 통해서 댄진 저번 주와 송스 지 다음에 통화사 이렇게 무슨 책 드릴 수도와 대 대권한이 대권한이 있어야 돼 런지웨이 송그레 선사웨이 송그레 배지다 대가사 주고 대신은 샤고도 레지 대권한이 동바산데 요하로다 다 동배 된디 땡중 세하게 고아데다 통문이 버지다 레고야 그래서 인도 땡중 대권한이 수야데 내가 좀 해볼 수도 다 안데 다지 자원 고불로 주고 수야데 그래서 내가 쉬쉬위 땡진저원 좋아하고 되는 동문이 되는 때는 돼 뒤니 우매라면 노선 소샤다 다 자왔대 동배 된 가르스로나 다들 미니를 써야 돼 맞지 동배 된디 때는 다 봐 사지 때는 딱서 마도 깨는 디버서 마도 또 깨는 디버 쌈 디상고 코요나 편에 여대버디 배지다 지고 그 외도 무슨 그리고 예루도 깨는 디버서 써야 돼 슉슉슉도 와 세상에 넘시人生 지도 땡땡 밀로 통화 장면에서 땡들서 뒤지고 지기가 안 되셔 투문도 깨는 디버서 저 상담이나 깨는 디버서 상담 코를 뒤 가서부터 매네 방면에 여기 개용이지가 되도 사다 때려 진짜 인도 왔대 관대 땡중 밀류 땡지기 신신 미터 탐지 지르셔봐 나와려고 레셔 여가르기 루미 군대 제로 체체 산계장제 때문에 람통네 도루루서 소울 민신 수 전에 지금 그런 거다 무척에다 가서 우리 대화 통치받다 되버려 다 뒤슈거든만 뒤주로 하잖아 제가 공소 사면도 이 저때 때문에 님분지 두배정도 루쇼니기 수마만 대바다 대전 남주 전대 2초 리즈 취시 상보다 자연시도 자괴처럼 근교 캡다 대셔 슈자 김이세베 대바이 님기 빼면 되고 그 때문에 서로 진이 되면 리모데 매주 담지 좋은 디체소 렉셔 대신 대 송로도 마음에 주주 루루 통하면기 지신대 주인이 신대서 디신 차가 내려 샤나가 디신이 뭐는 지신으로 섬기 지신 차도에 지신을 그나거든 그나 치심으로 지도하시.
지신들 그걸로.
지신의 동안. 말이야. 그 말이잖아. 뒤안다 지신도 지신이 있어. 지심으로 써.
지신에는 주신 지제가 세대로.
지신 때문에 주니 신대수. 지신 안에 다 있나? 지신 차원 되는 샤나 강스. 랍신조는 링내 수고이 개세 링내 군을 개배장 신도 빠가 서다 자전에 지신년에 수신 지제배经济시로 출연 용답에 가준 신부 여러 친구네스다. 지금 고난 양문 지수도가 랑가 캬라 타네 가와게 또 그거면서 끔걸 신도 신부 꾸진제 현실 개배시로 그거다. 영중로로 닝내 자와다. 대버지 정도 내려봐 네가 편준 전신 표하죠. 대지증내 냐면 또게네 관계 제 예배 리베남 대인남도 깨마오 뭐설시 집을 내가 가야 자주 철었어. 대대달라 마면 나와이 되는 싫어셔게 쌈대봐 싫은 타고 골로 두고 보 예배 동서 내준 예배시 대배 체외 양도가 대대로 개왕하고 관계인데 런데제 남신 대존에 루미 리베 남게 타고 기 저다 점식이 랍즈슈데 디스무도와 대달람제도 남수지 나노랑 지신다고 해서 웬바텐데 준비 떡게네 땡긴도 뭐도 주식 부 세송도와 어디 되는 샤다데 루미 리베 남게 타고 기 춘이 신대수지 늘베베 다르서는 건시사고 대 루루 도미 지신 겨와이 담주터다 유인즈버쇼 추디 겨와 깨버 추디 겨와 깨버라 개색해버 꾸산 자양기 지들잡아 저도 다기장 랍진 쪄봐 랍진 쪄대
쪄라죠.
아
랍진 쪄라.
랍진 쪄봐 꾸니 쪄쇼 이니마다 어디 좋았어.
We will read from the verse on page 50, where Tsongkhapa writes that I revere from the depths of my heart all the excellent elucidations of these masters, the ornaments of the sages of this world. Yet when one's eyes of intellect is opened wide, as a night lily garden bursts in blooms by the white light shining from Chandra's moon, and Buddhapalita's appointed path is seen, who is there who would not hold supreme the most excellent system of Nagarjuna? Such is my answer. So Tsongkhapa here, talks about how the excellent elucidation.
야 같이
I think okay. Okay.
가서 지나도 돼? 돼?
말이 인진데 코데 텐중 멜로디디 인진아 멘두. So there is a line which says that how the grasping at all forms of characteristics and signs are brought to an end and destroyed by the reasoning, infallible reasoning of the dependent origination of both samsara and nirvana. And this reference to dependent origination is very important because Tsongkhapa does not say reasoning of emptiness. And there is a significance to this. For example, in his three principal aspects of the elements of the path, Tsongkhapa explains, therefore, he advises, therefore, the aspirant should strive in the means of understanding dependent origination. And similarly, when he talks about the qualities of the Buddha's speech, he praises the Buddha for teaching dependent origination. He doesn't praise the Buddha for teaching emptiness. And the emphasis of the importance of this is because, otherwise one can understand emptiness as pure non-findability of things when we search for their essence. but the real understanding of emptiness has to take place where emptiness is understood in terms of dependent origination. So in Tsongkhapa's writing, this equation between emptiness and dependent origination is really emphasized, which he sees to be the heart of Nagarjuna's kind of teaching and message. For example, Nagarjuna explains in his fundamental stanzas on the middle way, he says that whatever is dependently originated, that has been taught to be empty, and that is dependently designated, this is the true middle way. So where there is an equation made between dependent origination and emptiness, and so the true understanding of emptiness really has to be where emptiness is understood in terms of dependent origination. And here I find this phrase from Chandrakirti really powerful when he uses the phrase, this mere conditionedness. Even the word dependent origination doesn't seem to be strong enough. Whereas when you bring Chandrakirti's phrase, this mere conditionedness, really seems to shake any possibility of grounding something objectively real from the side of the object, from the thing itself. And so when you bring that, then it really is able to shake our grasping. And this kind of perspective really needs to be applied not just to your own person and self, but also to the Buddha that we revere. Such as in Nagarjuna's text, you analyze the Tathagata by means of fivefold analysis. So you have to apply it to the Tathagata as well. And then in the when he says that someone who understands along those lines, who would not uphold Nagarjuna's system as most supreme, and here he is really expressing his kind of unshakable admiration in Nagarjuna's teaching as a result of fully understanding it through the help of Buddha Palita and Chandrakirti. And then we will read the remaining colophon, the verses where Tsongkhapa writes, devoted the Ijna Lokuyana. The Shamkati Jukjang Sujeti.
오늘 수제티.
Now. Sujetan Loku.
What did it?
Okay.
수제티. 내가 제가 그 잡아졌었지.
So
된 거는 뭐 좀 거때. 거는 뭐 좀 거.
거는 맞잖아. 계획 공습세 되는 거. 계획 공습세 지금 거대.
어디 걸어서.
So we will read from, I'll read from the whole colophon, the stanzas. He embodies the essence, this is on page 52. He embodies the essence of the teaching, the profound intention of the victor, revealed by the Sutra of the Profound, with vast learning in the many treatises of the two methodologies supreme of Buddha's philosophical traditions. His precise discernment of their import contemplates aright the path of reason, compelling to the hearts of subtle intellects, renowned as melodious Manju Ghosha. The garland of his fame spreads all around. The foot of the universal Lord. Devoted to it, I open my heart lotus center, faith powerfully streaming, and that philosopher of reason who sees the thatness of the discourse created this essay about the wisdom, wondrous message. Who else than this Lord Manjushri explains just so the champion system, the two ways Nagarjuna and Asanga, philosopher bulls, precisely elucidated the import of the Buddha's discourse, great treasure of true eloquence. Already expert in all the sciences of bodhisattvas, veterans of heroic deeds, are still inquired ever more penetrating into every further exact realization of those places, so difficult to measure, of the profound and the magnificent. And my heart was buoyantly delighted with the splendid banquet of totally pure samadhis, brilliant wisdoms and active ethics. 1 minute one swells with the joy of faith in the victor, the next one remembers the kindness of the champions. Other times one deeply reveres the expert spiritual teachers. One feels heartfelt love for suffering living beings. Or one wishes for the long endurance of the precious teaching. These feelings all increase as if in mutual competition. Such times when one feels the magic of the path of that philosophy which bestows the discovery of that place, so long desired, so hard to realize, Kimaho, how wonderful, though all none, the shout of joy burst forth. The moon of philosophers shine on such a one, honoring him again and again with garlands of brilliant praise, contemplator of the supreme wisdom, leader of those pure and ethical behavior, discoverer of the definitive meaning, principal heir of the victorious Buddha. The intelligent who wishes to win such Buddha honors should immerse themselves in this clear exposition and purify the eyes of their intellects with the path of philosophical reason. Here, His Holiness also referred to the ending advice of the three principal elements of the path, where Tsongkhapa says that so once you have understood so once you in that last stanza of three principal elements of the path, Tsongkhapa says that once you have, as a result of studying and contemplating on the meaning of the three principal elements of the path as presented, then you should seek solitude, and then and for a long period of time you should strive with all your effort to make these realizations real in you. So Tsongkhapa is saying that once you have understood and studied, so Tsongkhapa does not say that once you have mastered the topics, then you go keep talking all the time. He says go and practice. And this is true because, if one can seek solitude, as the Tibetan expression goes, like a wounded animal, kind of alone, and reflect deeply on these realizations, and spend the entire day constantly observing and watching one's mind, that's when the real effects...
Entire days and nights.
No, entire day and night. And so then there will be a real effect. And then also in Tsongkhapa's own expression of his realization and studies, there is a text celebrating his studies. There, Tsongkhapa says that at the beginning, I devoted my entire time to cultivating vast amount of learning, and in the middle, I strove to ensure that all the teachings emerge as personal instruction, and then finally, I strove to implement all of these into practice, and then dedicate all the merits for the flourishing and endurance of the Buddha Dharma. So similarly in Gandhalayama, the Guru Yoga of 100 deities, there is a line which says that this is in the context of rejoicing in the virtues. and at this time of degeneration, I shall strive in cultivating a vast learning as well as strive in the actual practices, and by abstaining from the temptations to aid mundane concerns, I shall make my human existence meaningful, and then so it says that I. So His Holiness was saying that those who admire Tsongkhapa really need to make that as an example and live according to that. So then to carry on with the reading, then the last stanza, by whatever merit may have gained through this effort in the pioneering champions way of the two great systems, may the victor's holy dharma be long upheld, just as it was by Nagarjuna and Asanga. As the wise heroes of enlightenment, Samantrabhadra and Manjughosha work constantly to delight the victors, so also may all my activities be ocean waves of wisdom's goodness.
So now completed. So now, my responsibility now completed. Now your responsibility. You should study, further think, and then whatever you get some knowledge, implement. So that's now your duty. Now I'm leaving tomorrow to India. So your problem remain with you. So this actually is one of the effective method to tackle with these problems. Okay. Thank you. Talk, come on.